Alrighty, today on the bench we've got bag M and bag L of our MT48 2.0 build. I'm going to run these both together. They're both, shock filling building. Um, we'll go through this bladder instruction just like they give in the manual here. I've actually never done bladders before. Most of the racers around here, around Thornhill, do not run bladders, and I've never really found a need to run them. I might try them one day, but we'll see. I am gonna build these with bladders to see how it goes, and if it works out nice, maybe I try it on a race car. Yeah, I guess let's just jump right into it. If I can find my knife. Here we go. Plastic shock caps, plastic shock collars, plastic pistons. These are Delrin, I think. And these are the cartridge pieces, plastic nuts for the bottom of the shock for the cartridge. What's interesting is that on the race kits, these nuts are aluminum, not plastic. I guess plastic's good on a basher. I love these springs. New springs, huh? Bright and shiny. I like these quite a lot. Let's see. There we go. Very nice. There's your bladders, balls, and O-rings. Spring retainers and shaft ends, the shafts themselves. Shock bodies. Shock boots. These are interesting and different. Do I have? Yeah. So this is one of the shock boots off of a race car. And these are the new ones for the monster truck. Quite a little bit different. They feel like they're the same rubber, just different shape. I kind of like this look a little bit better, and it looks like it wouldn't get snagged so much when crashing and things. These will get snagged and tear pretty frequently. Hopefully, these with their lower profile will not snag on so many things and tear. We'll see. I'll do each of these bags kind of separate just to keep things in line. These can go in the bin. We'll go ahead and trim all of the parts off of our sprue. It looks like these shock caps we're going to have to drill. I have a drill bit, but I did not bring my drill with me today, so we're going to have to kludge it a little bit, but it'll be okay. These are all parts for the shock cartridge. They go in the bottom of the shock itself. We'll build those cartridges here in a minute. And these larger hats go on the bottom. And these are going to be our pistons. Okay. So, since we started with bag L, we'll build the cartridge first. I like to take a driver and start to build that way. There's a couple of things we'll need to do to kind of prep. One is there's an O-ring that will slide over the end of the shock body, and it'll recess into a little groove at the base. Yep, like that. Just like that. And then we'll build the cartridge. So yeah, I'd like to take a tool. You can basically build this in reverse. So you start with the large hat, is that is what's going to come out of the bottom. And then you'll put an O-ring. And then one of these flat spacers. And an O-ring. And then the smaller hat. And to give you a sense of what it looks like, it's like that. So from there, typically just insert it into the shock body, and then you'll bring your plastic nut on, and that'll sort of close everything up. And then you just kind of want to bring this till it gets flush. Don't tighten it down yet. We'll do that after we get to the next step here when we start to fill it, put the shock piston in. So same thing, large hat, O-ring, flat spacer, O-ring, and then the small hat. And we'll put that right in the bottom of the shock. And again, get your nut, wind it down until it just sits flush there. And that gets your cartridges built. Now from here, actually, one of the things that they don't really tell you to do here, but one thing that is nice to do is take a little bit of this black grease and put on the O-rings on the inside there. You don't have to go crazy, just a little bit to let the shock shaft come through without, causing too much binding. You don't want to. The point is really to avoid tearing of the O-rings as you pass the shock shaft through. It does say use green slime or oil on the shock shaft threads and O-rings to prevent leaking and tearing. Get a napkin, clean up that grease off the bottom. Nice. Okay. Shafts and pistons. Looks like the pistons taper down. These nuts are usually a 5 millimeter, which is a little unusual for these kits, as there's not many 5 millimeter nuts around. I have a 5 mil driver. Not everybody does. You can use a pair of pliers in a pinch. Then use your shock tool to kind of clamp the shock shaft while you tighten the nut down. And for these, they typically tell you to tighten that nut down only until it's tight to turn the piston on the shaft, because otherwise it sort of compresses the piston, deforms it, and it could, spread that out to hit the shock body, and that would give you a little bit of bind you probably don't want. So just tight enough to where you can still turn the piston on the shaft. But it does have a nylock nut, so it shouldn't come off. They do ask you to place a little bit of grease on the threads. We can go ahead and do a little bit of that. Since we already put some in the O-rings, we should be okay, but just be safe. Let's take and move this car for now. We'll use this stand for our build. And so, yeah, you just sort of feed that through. Get yourself a napkin to wipe off the grease after you've fed it through the shock body there. And that gets that built. They do actually have you put on the collars and the boot and the eye at this point, it looks like. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll guess like there, kind of looks like the picture. Shock piston. A 5 millimeter nut. And just tight. A little bit of grease on the threads. And drive that through. Get a little napkin to wipe your grease off. All right, since this has us actually go and put the boot and everything on, let's go ahead and do that here. So we will need our, well, we could have done without that. Where did that go? We're good at losing things here on the bench. All right, let's try that again. Hopefully without a mess. Collar. All right. Line that on, get it roughly even with the other one. Yeah. All right. Let's build these ends. And we're supposed to drill these. I do have a bit, but no drill. So I just use this little vice grip. You're supposed to use a 1/16 screwdriver drill bit or a 1mm drill bit. It's not very thick plastic. It should go right through. I wish I had a little bit of a twist drill here. That would make life a little easier. Looks like we're almost through. This is just to make a bleeder hole for the side of the shock, because what's going to happen is you'll bleed the air and the excess oil out of the shock from here. You want to kind of try to get any of this sort of flashing out of the way if you can. The sort of shredded bits that come off when you make your hole. We'll do the same thing on this guy. There's a nice little dimple. Just run it in. Or maybe we could just twist the part instead of the... Nah, that doesn't really work all that well. This would be nice and easy if I would have brought a drill. All right. All right, just clean that up a little bit. Looks good. Yep. Okay. Then we should put the boots and the eyes on as well while we're here. So you just slide the boot over, and then it kind of will come up around the nut there. You can use your shock tool to hang onto your rod while you turn the eye on. And they tell you actually to leave a 40mm gap between the bottom of the nut and the start of the eye. So we're just say 41mm, 40mm. It's like that. Right on. Nice. Nice new shock boots. Oh, you know what? One thing we did not do was tighten that nut down after we put the piston through. One thing you can do here is take your shock tool and use that as a clamp on the body. It fits right into that 17mm hole, and then you can just twist it there or hang on to it here. It's really just thumb tight, so you don't have to go crazy. I'll remember to tighten that other one down before we go too far. Oops. So just barely a little bit of thread showing. And let's tighten this guy up. Yeah, that one's tight. Good. Let's tighten this guy up. All right. So that gets us our shocks built for the front. And these both get 850 oil. They've given you 2 bottles of it. You fill it most of the way. And then we'll come back and pump the shock to get any air out of the bottom. And then top it up again. And then so pump the shock. You'll see big air bubbles come up. Yeah. So we'll fill these up. And we'll let them sit while we build the back end. Now these will be ours for the next step. We're going to take these eyes off and actually put those in the ends. That'll save us a little bit of trouble. So these go into the eye of the shock cap. It doesn't really matter which direction you go here, since we're not using the bleeder holes. It's no big deal here, right? If we were using these bleeder holes, we would need to make sure that these screws are facing inside of the car, because they tend to stand a little bit proud of this. And if they're facing out of the car, they can get filled with dirt and scratched up, scarred up, all that stuff. But for these, I don't think it's really going to make too much of a difference. I will do them opposite just because. Yeah. And then these are spring retainers, our screws and nuts for the shock tower connections. Okay, let's jump into bag end. Rock through that while we're waiting for L to settle down. Hello. I wasn't expecting that. There's only 2 things missing off of that sprue. Good. Good. Same springs in the rear. Are they shorter? Longer, shorter, what? Looks like, let's see, rear. This one's front. Yeah, all the same. Nice. Some fun. All yellow. Pretty springs.
So this process, just like bag L, no different. The only difference here really is probably the length of the shock body. No, it looks like they're the same too. On the racers, we tend to have longer shocks in the rear. Looks like these are the same length front and back. Let's free all our plastics from their sprues. It's always things trying to run away. Well, I kind of just fell off of the sprue, didn't it? Guess you have to be careful with these things. There's a chance a piece just falls off without even really trying too hard. Let's see if we can clean that up a touch. Yeah. Those other ones came off nice and clean. These are a little bit messy. Okay. Shocks. Rings. So the rings for the bottom of the shock body. And then we can build our cartridges, again in reverse. So large hat, O-ring, flat spacer, O-ring, small hat. And this one could use a little trim too. Small hat. And I could use a little trim too. All right. And then insert into the shock body. Is that getting snagged on what? Looks like we're getting caught on something. Oh, okay. It looks like this part of the cartridge might have a little nub on it that I need to nip off with the razor. Yep. Okay. Try it again. Perfect. And your nut. Just down flush, and then some grease. Same process. Big hat. Little O-ring. Flat spacer. Little O-ring. Small hat. And insert into the shock body. And we'll put our nut. And again, just flush, no big deal. A little bit of grease. Let's build our pistons.
And then we can insert the piston. That little bit of grease that we put should be plenty. Yeah, maybe too much, but that's okay. Let's try not to lose everything today. All right. Let's put our collars on. And we can tighten these nuts down now that the shock shaft is in. Yeah. Let's put these collars. One thing you could do is take this wheel wrench and use that as your sort of gripper. Mine's down a little bit further, so I'm pretty easy to tell the difference between front and rear, right? Let's get these eyes and retainers off of this sprue and build those guys. All right. Ball ends. And tighten our nut down. Our shock boot. And then the eye. And just barely a thread showing. And that shock should be done. Again, 850 all around for the oils. Again, we'll kind of fill this up most of the way, give it a pump, get the air out, and then let it settle and get all the air bubbles out. And that'll be what we can do while we're waiting for we can build the front end while we're waiting for the back to sort of settle in. All right, and give this guy a pump. Yeah, it's a nice big air bubble there. Okay, next. Same thing, nose nice and tight. Shock boot. Slip it over the nut. And we'll turn that on until it's just about a thread showing. Yeah. All right.
All right, that's pretty well the rear is done. Until we go to the next step. All right, just top those up a little bit. These are our rear springs. So bladder builds. Oh yeah, we do need to cut holes in our caps. Thankfully, this is a really small hole and it's really short. Wish I would have remembered to bring my drill. Good news is that's the last one we need to do. All right. So we're following instructions. We did drill a small bleeder hole. There's a small dimple. Yep. We removed the flashing. We will insert a bladder and leave a side. This bladder looks like it goes the bubble side down. So let's go ahead, put bladder there. So we've already extended the shock shaft all the way down and filled the shock with oil. And we slowly pump the shock shaft up and down 3 to 5 times to release air bubbles. Those steps we've done. Step 4 is to let the shock rest vertically with the shock shaft fully extended for approximately 5 minutes. So these guys have been sitting while we built the rears. So top off each shock with oil. Add a few drops of oil on top of each bladder inside of the caps, on top of each bladder inside of the caps. Like this or on the other side? I'm going to guess that since we had to insert the bladder, then add the oil, that we'll just add some oil to the bladder. I don't know quite why, but there's some oil. Okay? Paper towel we have. Place the cap on the shock and screw on about halfway. Some oil will leak out. Okay. I'll place the cap on the shock and start it on halfway. No oil leaked out yet. Some oil leak out. While holding the shock shaft at 90%, fully tighten the shock cap. Okay, so bring it up to like here. And then tighten the shock cap down. That's easy. I mean, wow, nice and easy. Okay. Maybe I should start using bladders. So a nice thing you can do here
is use this wrench, and your wheel wrench has a notch out on the top. You can actually use to insert the shock cap into the wrench and then use that to tighten the shock cap on. And it looks like that skipped the thread there, so don't go too tight. Jump the thread, don't go too tight. We'll see how these go. I'm curious. Like I said, I put metal shock caps on the other monster truck just because they seem to be a little bit more durable. We'll see how these do. I have some extra metal ones that we can use just in case. And then with that, we can place the spring on the shock, and our spring perch kind of slips around the shock shaft and onto the end there, and then you'll use one of these grub screws to connect the eye and the spring perch. And with that, you have a nice, pretty shock build. Okay. Let's do the other front one here. Place bladder into the cap. Oops, that was almost upside down. Put some oil. I don't know how much oil to put. Sure, let's go with that. Place the cap on and turn it on halfway. Thread it on halfway. There's some oil came out. Compress it to 90%. That's a lot of oil coming out. And then tighten the shock cap. I'm going to go ahead and leave this just sort of finger tight. I think that the bladder will do most of the work. Yeah, that feels great. All right. Spring perch, again, slides sort of over the shaft and up onto the eye. And again, you're going to use one of these grub screws. They are 1.5 mil drive. So that is our front shocks built. Let's go ahead and finish the rear. It's a lot easier than building without the bladders, as you have to bleed and pump the shocks and then bleed them again. This way, it's a little faster for sure. I can just sort of set the shock and close it, and life's good. A little oil on the top. Probably a lot of oil will come out of this one. We'll see. And screw the cap on. Has made a mess. We grab another paper towel. Nice. Definitely faster than doing it with bleeder screws and no bladder, I'll say.
That'll be a rear. And one more. Thread it on halfway. Some oil comes out. Pump it to 90%. Close the lid. Wipe off your excess oil. Oh, we forgot to put a color on this one. Let's do that now. All right. Spring perch. And where's our grub screw? Excellent. So that's our shocks built. Looks like this one still bleeding. That's better. That one is not. That one appears to be. These are not quite sealed. It looks like it's still letting some air through, but I'm gonna guess that's at the top of the bladder, so maybe that's okay. Okay, so with that done, we can put these right on the truck, I think. Yeah. So step L and M5 really are to put the shocks on the truck. So we decided these are all the same. Mix and match them. Let's get the truck. So, when you're installing these, you want the spring perch eye to be facing the outside of the car. And this flat should be up against the shock standoff. This hole, not important for our purposes because we're not using the bleeder screws here, but if we were, you want that to face inside of the car, not out. But for us, we can set it either direction. So all you need to do is place these on over the standoffs. There are shoulder nuts. That'll go on the standoffs to hold the top end of the shock on. And then there are left and right-handed thread screws that will go in the
arm end of the shock, and they are black and silver. The indicator is basically your silver one is left-hand threaded and the black one is right-hand threaded. And basically when you're looking at the car, you want the right-hand threaded on the right and the left-hand threaded on the left. Which holes do they have us use here? Stock shock position is middle hole on the tower and middle hole on the arm. So, yep, you want to make sure that that eye hole is kind of lined up for you. You just place it into the hole there and put your right-hand threaded screw through the eye and into the arm. You'll use your 5.5 nut driver to put it in. This one you don't really want tight, just snug. If you run it too tight, you'll either pull the threads out of the back or it'll bind the shock inside of that hole, and you don't want that. You want that to be free, as free as you can. Oh, and I didn't follow my own instructions. I didn't place the eye for the spring perch out like I was supposed to. This one is a left-handed thread, so you will thread it in counterclockwise. And again, you're just going until you make it snug. Let's take this guy off and switch that perch around. All right. Same thing on the front. Shoulder nuts for the standoffs. And then our left and right hand thread screws. For the front, they have the shocks going where? Stock shock position is middle hole in the tower and inside hole on the arm. Oh, that's the wrong side. That's your right-handed thread. And once we get all these bolted up, we'll move on to the next bag, and towards the end, we'll run through the setup, make sure all the things like droop and so on are set properly, so we're ready to rip. Nice. That's suspension done. This thing's coming together. Pretty too. All right, that's it for bag L and M. Stay tuned for bag N. We're gonna wrap this thing up and hopefully we'll give it a run. See how it goes. Stay tuned. Make sure to like and subscribe.